This interview is being conducted for the Queer Lives Oral History Project. My name is Rachel Kelly and the respondent's name is Wendy Miller. This is the 23rd of May 2024 and the interview is taking place at the Marie Trust in Glasgow. Thanks very much for agreeing to be interviewed for this project, Wendy.
Thanks, Rachel.
For the record, could you please confirm your full name?
Wendy Miller.
And could you please state your year, just the year of birth?
1975.
Where were you born?
I was born in the then Irvine Central, now known as Ayrshire Central, I think.
And whereabouts did you grow up?
So I grew up in Dalrymple, which is or was a mining village in the then Cumnockendon Valley. That must be a sign of getting old, the then, I keep saying, like.
So whereabouts do you live now?
I live in Govan Hill, in the south side of Glasgow.
Okay, so we've used the term queer in an attempt to be as inclusive as possible.
Sure.
But we appreciate that not everybody would use that term to describe themselves or stroke an aspect of themselves.
I would use that term actually. Yeah, I would use the term queer. Describe myself as a queer artist and poet.
Do you have any preferred pronouns?
She, her.
Okay, and would you mind telling me if you've come out in inverted commas as queer?
Yes, I have. Yeah, it was quite a difficult time coming out to my family when I was about 27. It was very difficult. My parents found it really hard to come to terms with. So it was a process that took maybe about 10 years for our sort of wounds to heal, for everyone to recover and evolve and move on. So yeah, it was very difficult because, as I say, I came from a former mining village, and in the village everyone knows each other and everyone, and my parents found it so difficult. They couldn't really, it was just the sense of how could this be. So it was very difficult, but things are much better now. So I do reflect on it sometimes, but it was very challenging. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, actually, coming out to my parents. But I'm also very lucky in being queer. At that time, even, I've always had a really supportive network of my chosen family around me, like very close friendships. So I think that helps. These people hold you up during difficult times. So, and it was definitely the right thing to do because my family, we have a very close relationship now with my family, including with my partner and our son. So things have evolved a lot.
So when you were younger, what was your experience of growing up as a queer person? I mean, I don't think I fully realised until I was in my early 20s. So maybe that made it easier. Some of that was because nobody was gay in Ayrshire at that time, so it didn't really. So I had relationships with boys and stuff, and I wasn't not into that. So yeah, it took me a while to realise. So I can't say that I had a difficult time of it, you know. So I suppose I realised I felt attracted to women, and that was at that time that was something to feel quite ashamed of and confused, and so I told a few close friends, but and they were very supportive, and then I sort of moved to Glasgow and went out on the gay scene and started to sort of explore my sexuality a bit, but still at that time I was thinking that maybe I was bi,
I wasn't too sure. It was a confusing time. And I suppose that meant that there was a number of years where you're kind of living a little bit, feels a bit like subterranean, where you're going to gay clubs but not telling straight friends and stuff. Like I remember having a flatmate when I lived in the West End. I remember coming back from being out in like the Polo Lounge or something, and I remember her asking me, where were you tonight? And I said, oh, I was in this bar called, and I just chose this bar called October Cafe, which was a lie. I hadn't been there at all. And my flatmate, who was straight, said, well, that's weird, because I was at a private birthday party there. And I was like, oh shit, sorry. So do you know what I mean? Those kind of collisions could happen where you could get caught out. And so you were always like, you know, if you were making new friends or being in the workplace, you were always hiding a part of yourself, and it wasn't a nice way to live, because I'm quite an open person and I like to make friends, different aspects of my life. So it was, it doesn't, I mean, the only thing I can compare it to for heterosexual people, like maybe having an affair or something where you couldn't tell people about, or if you were doing a job that was secret or whatever, but it's psychologically corrosive, I think, to be in the closet. So it was a difficult time, but it was definitely better to be in that situation living in a city than it would have been living in a village. If I'd stayed at home, that would have been impossible. There wouldn't have been anywhere to go. You know, there wouldn't be any like gay clubs in Ayr.
Did you have friends in the village that were accepting or otherwise of you?
Not really. I mean, I had one who has passed away, sadly. That I think I told him a bit later on. But yeah, I'm not really in touch with many people in the village. And I think that was quite conscious. I cut myself off from a lot of people in the village and from a lot of extended family, because I just felt like they're not going to be accepting. I'll not go to family stuff, and that'll be easier that way. And I kind of regret that now, because there's a few aunts and uncles that have died that I'm like, oh, I wish I'd known you better actually, and I didn't. So.
And how about, did you face any barriers in workplaces? Or career?
I haven't. I mean, I've worked on a few papers where I hadn't come out, and it was kind of like I was keeping it a secret, or maybe the odd person would know. But I hadn't really come out. But there was definitely a sense when I worked for the record group that people, you know, there was a bit of like, you would hear stuff like, oh, so and so said this about you and stuff. So I don't know if I'd describe that as a barrier, but definitely there was definitely a sense of disapproval then. But in later years I've worked in, like, you know, from call centres to I've worked in a prison, a couple of prisons. I now work in education, and it's actually like everyone's really accepted. I wouldn't even question coming out now in the workplace. I would be like, that's just something you do. And in fact, I think because I work as a lecturer, it's really important, I've realised, to be visibly out so that I can be a positive role model to young queer people that I might be teaching, because it's really important for them to see that. Because I never had that in school. We didn't have any teachers that were out, and so I didn't even figure out that I was gay until really late, because, as I say, nobody was gay, like, openly, so it just wasn't a thing. And so, I think that visibility is so important.
Do you think that the experience of being queer has changed over time in terms of acceptance or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've evolved a lot in Scotland, and I think the legal protections that are in place now really help that, because the laws caught up. I think society was moving that way anyway. I mean, we've come a long way since Section 28. Society was moving that way, and then the law caught on and caught up, and
So we've got equal marriage, but first of all we had civil partnerships where you were allowed to. For me, I wasn't in agreement with that politically, because I felt like, well, don't sell me a watered down version of your own tired institution, you know. So I'm happy that we have equal marriage now, because I think that recognises, and I think actually for queer people who have chosen to get married and stuff, they like that because it gives them an equal playing field. But in some ways there's heteronormalisation as well, which I'm like, but it has to be an option, it has to be on the table. But the law that has helped me, that I really respect, is I think it's the Human Embryo and Fertilisation Act it's called, and it means that we had my son, and I'm on his birth certificate even though I'm not his birth mum, so I'm legally his guardian. So I think those kind of laws are really important, and the two feed off each other. If people behave in a way that's more accepting and the law confirms that, then the two work together to advance society, don't they? So yeah, I think it's completely different when I think about 20 years ago. Acceptance is much greater, and I tend to just assume that people are okay with it, and I think that that's just a way to live. It's a bit like philosophically assuming that most people are good. I think that's a good kind of way to live your life. Don't assume that people are bigoted or racist, you know, because why would they be? And if they are, then be shocked by it and call them out on it.
Is there anything you'd like to change in terms of workplaces going forward?
I think we need more groups, like queer groups. That I'm on one at Glasgow College, and like maybe just recognising certain things, like recognising Pride and having an event, and not just Pride. I think in schools there should be more, like in my son's school, I went along to a discussion about equality, and I asked about provision of books about families like ours in the library, and they were like, oh no, we don't need that. They were quite dismissive, and I realised I was just there to tick a box. So I think definitely we could do more, because we recognise in schools now they're on board with recognising different types of ethnicities, and it's not even just queer families. They need to do more to recognise and support just different types of families, like kids that are adopted and fostered, single parents. That needs to be in their literature, it needs to be in the teachings, and of course there's always debate and discussion politically about sex education and how that's taught. And I mean, even in question time last week they were talking about how, how they teach children, and I suppose what's deemed the culture wars about trans people at the moment, that's become, it's kind of like the same arguments that were used against gay people back in the day, that, you know, now they're the demons, the trans people, and it's like, no, people need to be supported, you know, and it's not an ideology to try and turn our children into a different sex, you know. It's just like so short-sighted. Sorry, I've kind of lost my thread now. We can always do more, I think, in summary. We can always do more, because in the past we used to say, as queer people, we used to say, we just want acceptance. We just want people to go, what you do in the bedroom is up to you, we just want you to be okay with that. But we need more than that, actually. We want to be cherished for who we are. We want to be recognised, and to be as being part of society as we are. Yeah, it's not enough just to be tolerated, it's more than that, you know. And young people need to hear that as they're growing up, gay or trans.
So we have a duty as elders, middle-aged citizens of the queer generations to be positive role models and to show future generations that they're part of society and that they are positive parts of society.
Have you faced any healthcare issues due to being queer?
So when we had my son, that was pretty difficult because I felt really patronised by the NHS. They got it wrong, like when we'd gone to speak to the doctor and stuff about trying to conceive, and I think at one point they sent out like a request for a sperm sample, and we were like, right, we're a same-sex couple, right? So stuff like that. That's just one example. And then I remember on one of Gillian's maternity appointments, I think I felt quite lost and I felt quite invisible during the whole pregnancy. I felt like I don't know what my role's going to be. I mean, maybe it's not necessarily up to the health service to help you with that, but I remember speaking to a midwife and saying, you know, I feel a wee bit, I don't know, I think that it was a conversation about breastfeeding, and I said, well, you know, I don't know if we're going to do that because I want to feed the child. And I remember she said something like, oh, you know, maybe you can like change baby's nappy. And I was just like, and it made me think, you know, maybe men feel like that as well. But yeah, I felt kind of invisible. So it's not that I've been denied healthcare or anything, but that I think it's just that we don't have any guidebooks. We don't have any. We didn't have anyone who had experienced that, like a same-sex couple having a baby. So there was no one to kind of go to. I think for heterosexual couples, there are always friends and family that are like, oh, this is how you'll be fine and blah blah blah. We didn't have anyone to go to, or it was a sort of new thing. Although I did have friends that had a baby, but I think they'd split up by then. So I felt a bit invisible until Edwin was born, and then like I sort of instantly felt like different, and like that he was mine. So I just felt instant love the minute he was born. So I think I wasn't sure how I was going to feel, because I didn't really connect to the sort of the baby in Gillian's womb, I feel like. I didn't really feel, I just felt a bit numb through the whole pregnancy and stuff, so I didn't know how I was going to feel about being a non-birth mum. But as I say, it all worked out the minute that he was real and born. So and actually he's turned out to be quite like me somehow. So nature, my partner says, however, managed to give birth to another Wendy. So I think the whole nurture over nature has been quite strong for us, because we're very alike. So and also his name is an anagram of mine, which is just the best thing for a writer, because he's Edwin with a Y, so that's just the best thing. I love that. So we're connected that way.
And was that on purpose?
Well, I don't think it wasn't. We were so sleep deprived and stuff when we were like, but we were going to call him Edwin, or maybe Wyn, W-Y-N, because of Wyn Butler from Arcade Fire. But then when we had friends that bought us wooden letters for his room, and when we opened it, Gillian said, oh, why have you bought me, like, it spells Wendy? And they were like, well, it would, it's Edwin with a Y. And we were like, oh my god. Also, it turns out that my great grandfather was called Edwin, and I didn't know that, but maybe on some level I did, I don't know. But when I told my mum, she was like, oh, thank you very much. And I was like, what for? So yeah.
So how did you find support services for when you were when Edwin was little?
So I suppose we just joined the sort of middle class mummy mafia in the Southside, and people were mostly heterosexual women, and were very accepting, I have to say. Actually, it's quite interesting because a lot of the women would often say to Gillian, your relationship's much more equal than ours. Like, our husbands they're not pulling their weight with the child, they're not doing the, like, they would be kind of envious of us and be like, you guys seem to have a more equal relationship. So that was something that we noticed, yeah.
How about any medical services?
So, I mean, we would have like, I suppose Edwin would have like visits and jags and stuff, and we didn't really, I suppose one of us would take him and they would just, sometimes they would assume that I was his birth parent. That happened a lot, and it still happens a lot actually. Like, old ladies would come up to me and say, oh my god, he's your double. And I'd be like, yeah. Because people see what they want to see, I guess. So I don't think I had any problems with health services. Sometimes if we've gone to an appointment on our own, occasionally someone, like a medical person, would make a mistake and say, who's mum? And like, I have to say my partner is usually like quick to, she would go, we're both his mum, and then they'd be like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So, but not had that a lot. So I haven't had any negative experiences.
Do you ever think about your future as you age?
God, I try not to. I'm kind of like, I'm Wendy from Peter Pan, so I'm eternally youthful in my outlook. So I don't really think about being old. But I would hope that maybe Edwin would look after us if we get to be old.
Do you have any concerns about the provision of elder care for queer people?
Of course, it must be a concern if we have evidence that there's discrimination and prejudice now for queer people receiving elderly care, and I guess it has to be a question. It's not something that I've thought about. I would think about it more societally than personally, because I try not to think about being old and being. I would hope that my peers would not be bigoted, but you can't guarantee that, so it has to be a concern. It has to be something we think about, I guess. As I also worry about the what elderly care and social care will there be by the time that we're old, because the way that the state is being torn up by neoliberalism, I don't know if there'll be any services left.
Do you have any concerns or hopes for the future in terms of queer rights?
I have concerns about, even European countries, like in Poland in recent years. I think this government, they were called the Justice and Law Party, that were elected, it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I think they've maybe been ousted now, but they were banning abortion, and they were also they were establishing, like, they were really right wing, and they were establishing queer free zones, like areas where they were saying queers shouldn't be here, and queer people in Poland were really living in fear and leaving. It was appalling. I wrote a poem about it actually for a festival. So these kind of like far right, the growth in far right groups around Europe, I think queer rights, we can't take them for granted, and I think in Britain we're always like a bit smug and kind of like, oh yeah, I mean we've got an equal society and we're but it's not that long ago, you know, it's not that long ago that, since we've evolved and become better, so we need to not forget that, you know, and things can be rolled back really quickly. Look at what's happening to trans people. Look at what's happened in Scotland after, you know, we tried to get self-certification. Look at the way people reacted to that. I mean, I think that probably was one of the reasons the SNP imploded. Anyway, and if you look around the world, there are still loads of countries where queer people can be, they can go to jail, or they can be punished, or they can even be like, the death penalty can exist. So I think we still need to be fighting for queer rights globally. We need to keep discussing these issues and never get complacent. We can always do better. But at the same time, we have come a long way, and I'm grateful that I'm able to live the life that I can and have the family that I can, and to live openly, because I think that makes a huge difference to people's quality of life, being able to come out and live openly. I think your general well-being, quality of life is so much better, and so I really fear for people who don't feel. I studied actually with a person from Singapore, and that's a very conservative society, and that man, I spoke to him at length about it because he feels really conflicted because he has really close family relations, but I just said to him, don't beat yourself up and don't think that you have to come out to your family because it's not the right time for you, but you can still love your family, like don't cut yourself off from them. And he was just like, oh, thank you so much, and he's such a lovely human being, so I hope that one day he'll be able to, but it's just, he won't, it's not possible at the moment, so yeah.
Have I missed anything?
Don't
Is there
think
anything
so.
else you'd like to add at the moment?
Don't think so.
Okay, thanks very much, Wendy, for coming in and giving us your time.